Hi all, more fantastic games from the Chess Olympiad 2016 to show you. This one today is a game of our current world chess champion with the black pieces. This is against Dragan Solak. So it was the Norway against Turkey match of round 7. Norway have Carlsen 2857, Hammer 2651, Terry 2570 and Urikdal 2537. Turkey have Dragan Solak, board 1 2635 GM, Ipatov 2652 GM on board 2, Yilmaz 2616 on board 3, Essen 2524 on board 4. So interesting pairings, roughly equal teams except for the board 1. So Magnus Carlsen outrating his opponent significantly here. Let's see what happened. E4, we see D6, Piets, D4, G6, Knight C3, Bishop G7, Knight F3. Now, very interesting move, A6, Bishop E2. We have Knight F6, white castles, black castles, Rxe1. Now, Magnus plays it like almost like a king's engine defense. This Knight C6. Maybe with the idea of E5 soon. We have D5. Now, quite often Knight E5 is played here, not minding the double pawns. This has been seen quite a bit. Knight E5. Magnus doesn't play that. A possible continuation, he plays Knight A7 on Knight E5. Say taking. This isn't all bad. It's been seen quite a bit. It's interesting. But Knight E7 is even more interesting. It's a bit of a rare move. Rarer continuation, Knight A7. Does it look a little bit awkward? It could have gone to B8 as well. We have now H3, stopping any ideas potentially of Bishop G4, Knight G4. B5. Bishop drops back. So White is playing in a classical manner. He seems to have a modest pawn center occupation. The Piets player would like to try and undermine the center generally. Now this next move, Bishop B7. Okay, the bishop's blunted there, but it wants to break out with C6, so that's the plan. Break out across the diagonal and even try and create some king safety issues like we've seen in some other classic master games. For example, this pattern of blasting the bishop through was dramatically shown in an early Fischer against Tau game. Tau broke through this diagonal and got to White's king. Is this similar? Let's have a look. A4. Now this move does provoke B4, which kind of decentralizes a little bit White's knight. B4, Knight A2, A5. The idea clearly is to weaken black on the light squares a bit, and potentially like C3 or C4 could be handy. Assuming not C3, actually that would be rather awkward potentially for B3. Well, when the queen is not there, B3 would then be winning knight. But C3 or C4 is interesting. It's actually possible to play C3 here, but C4 was played. And yes, this definitely is starting to take the feel of a king's engine defense, with White having the broader pawn center now. Now, if Magnus, he has the option of taking on C3, which he didn't use. So taking on this position, for example, White's clearly got a nice control on B5. This is potentially vulnerable pawn. Potentially the C file, this pawn could be subject to pressure. So yeah, Magnus doesn't want to expose these two guys in particular by taking here, and he actually leaves that situation. He just plays E6, and it looks as though the bishop's really hemmed in now with this broad center. But we have a few chipping maneuvers coming up. After Bishop G5, this is actually kicked back. So White is trying to provoke weaknesses over here. Now with Queen D2 as a possibility, it's also looking at the knight tying down the rook. But Queen D2 or Queen C1 will look at H6. Rxe8. Yeah, on knight takes E4, that's a poisoned pawn. Bishop takes A7. Looking at just winning material. So we have rook e8. Now actually bishop d3 is played. E takes, and now chipping away at white's center with c6. Yes, and we see that this is actually an interesting road to white's king. This diagonal, if going through the center, can get some exposure on g2 eventually. This bishop will be a good attacking piece potentially. And we see d takes c6, knight takes c6, but at the cost temporarily of this vulnerable looking pawn. Note this knight is also not great on a2. It tries to re-centralize. You might think a natural alternative, surely just probe this pawn. Actually, black can do quite a bit here. He can even sacrifice this pawn with knight d7, or he can even just protect it and not worry too much about d6. It's not such a clear-cut position for black's apparent weaknesses of h6 and d6. Just to show you, like here's a pawn sack, knight d7 takes. This is dangerous because of knight e5, or maybe even just the other one, knight e5. And this starts to be quite a dangerous position. If we have this position, black does have some persistent pressure in the position. There's definitely some compensation already here. And also, yeah, so queen d2, I mean, also black could just play king h7. And here, it's not so clear cut for d6 because of c4 actually. Things like knight e5 again, looking at f3 and c4. It's not so clear cut, this position, because black's pieces are really quite active. But anyway, this seems like a fairly logical idea just to re-centralize the knight. But again, black really is trying to peel open, in a way, further this diagonal, trying to get rid of this defensive knight next with this move. So going to e5 soon. But also there's another idea now. Queen c2, by vacating f6. In fact, in this particular position, Magnus is able to play a simple, clear move, queen f6, establishing more pressure on the diagonal, threatening the b2 pawn. The queen can't be easily kicked away from here. With h6, the g5 is safeguarded. So very, very pleasant position here for black. Now knight c e5 is chosen to try and blast through this diagonal a little bit more. So clearly some big threats now. Knight takes, knight takes. Now just to show you the subtle threat of this position, yeah, white's king safety is potentially at stake here. If he plays a move like b3, for sake of argument to show the threat, knight f3 is crushing. It's really crushing. For example, g takes, queen takes f3 threatening mate, king f1. Here there's bishop c3. This is absolutely murderous, taking away key escape squares. E.g. like this, and bang, checkmate. Yeah. So after b3, yeah, this is crushing. And if king h1, beautiful move here, can you see that black's got available? 5 seconds. Queen f4 using the pin, threatening mate. So if takes, that would be checkmate with the knight and rook. Yeah, it just shows the dangers of white's king here. If g3, knight takes e1, check. Yeah, it's all over. So this is the dangerous position, hence the bishop retreat seems fairly necessary here. After knight takes e5, we have a bishop retreat, safeguarding f3. d5 though, getting rid of black's only major pawn like weakness and opening up the diagonal. So black's really just completely opened up the center. Look, there's nothing occupying the center, and king safety has become an issue. There's no defensive knight on f3, and it looks as though, you know, a lot of pieces are actually pointing at white's king here. Knight b3, this knight is pretty awkward actually in this position, and the queen isn't well placed at all here. In fact, this is actually pretty diabolical for white. Magnus simply plays rook ac8, and it's just horrible. Where does the queen go? In fact, white goes into a horrible self-pin. That's never really, in principle, that great as a general rule. But if the alternative queen d1, then harassment of the queen, rook ed8, threatening bishop d2, etc. This position is extremely passive for white. For example, like this, it's just much better for black, much better. Magnus would be loving this position, surely. So this self-pin is interesting. Okay, so we have bishop f8, and at the moment, okay, the knight's not immediately coming off, but it's not too far short of that. Bishop takes c5. In this position, it is tempting to play knight d7, but Magnus didn't play that. He threatened actually mate here, which indirectly helps potentially protect the bishop. If he plays knight d7, there might be some complication with queen d2 counter-attacking on d5, but even this position is actually better for black. You know, it's pretty dangerous even this position because of weaknesses like f2 and b2. But Magnus's move is more clinical. Just by threatening mates here instead of knight d7, he's going to be indirectly defending the bishop, and we see this here after g3. Now knight d7. White nudges the queen, but it goes actually to d8, which again is indirectly defending the bishop. So any queen d2 now, there's just knight takes c5. Black is winning a piece in broad daylight here because of this nasty pin. We have bishop b5 trying to counter pin. Does it work? Black just takes on e1, and now rook takes c5, hitting the queen. Queen d2, finally with some pressure on d5 and attacking h6. But the only thing really is h6 here and h5. That's protected by the rook, of course. Queen d4 hitting the rook. But now a resourceful move. It looks as though white's threatening bishop takes and queen takes. Black's piece is a bit loose. Magnus has this handled. Can you see what he plays here? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay, queen f6, counter-attacking against the queen, getting the knight out of danger if that's taken. Queen e3, yeah, black's a piece up. He defends now. He can't move the knight yet because of the rook, but bishop c6 now, defending everything. Yeah, black's just a piece up. Check, knight f8. Black's just a piece up here, and in fact, in this position, with this pin now, how is Magnus getting out of this one? That's the final thing to sort out. Guess what he plays here? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, rook c2, just threatening mate with check and checkmate there. White takes this tokenly and allows the checkmate. There's either queen h2 or queen takes e1. In fact, yeah, Magnus made it look kind of easy with this piance. He broke through that. He opened up the center totally eventually, and there was some king safety issues. But just at the moment, well, White's probably looking at the king side threats. The queen is also and knight are also terrible pieces in White's position, and White ends up going into a terrible self pin and losing a piece in broad daylight in this game. Magnus made sure there was no counter-attack against his loose pieces with this queen g5. The queen indirectly defending his bishop on d5, and even on d8 indirectly defending d5. He was winning a piece in broad daylight. Some counter pins after that, but they were handled by Magnus. Yeah, tactical monster. Made it look easy, but the positional build-up, you know, blowing open the diagonal, blowing open the center. Very, very impressive game with the black pieces. And actually this helped Norway win this match against Turkey. The final score, this was the decisive game of the match. The other 3 boards were drawn, so Norway won that 2.5, 1.5 against Turkey in this particular round 7. Yeah, impressive stuff from Magnus, helping his country win this particular team match here. Comments, questions, likes, appreciated. Thanks very much.